Hello, in this video I'm going to do a follow-up to the workshop demo this week, and to remind you of where we were, we had a table view showing a list of movies that was updated from a Firestore collection. So I wanted to do a couple of things here just to clean up this class. So I'm going to get rid of most of this core data code. I guess I want these 4 lines that we will call create a method, save initial data, and just going to put those in there. I don't need the rest of this, but after we've loaded the data, which includes setting up the listener, I do want to have some logic here that adds the initial data to the database if necessary. And the way to do this is just to get a reference to our collection of movies, then we asynchronously ask it to get the documents in this collection, and then we check if they're empty. And if they're empty, we call our method here to save the initial data. And that's really all we're doing here. So that's just a little check to make sure that if you run the app with your own database, that it will initially populate it with the movies. Obviously it does nothing when the movies are already there. Is there anything else to clean up in here? I don't need this code for deleting movies. We know the way to delete them is just to call delete when we've got a particular reference. And that should be fine. So for this favorite movies view controller, I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to add back in that favorite movies view controller, and initially that's just going to be empty. So we're going to go in there and start adding some core data stuff to this. So the first thing we would need to do is import our Firebase Firestore imports. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a reference to the database, and it's exactly like we did it in the other class. Now I'm going to be using a default user, and for this I can just have a reference to the database, and we know that we can create these references, and it's only when we populate them with data that they actually appear in the database. So I'm going to create a reference. I'm going to do it as a lazy reference. So again, I'm going to ask for the database, reference a collection called users, and within that specify a document. And this time, this is the document ID. I've just called it default. And that's just for convenience because I'm going to use this in a few different places, so I don't have to repeat this line, and then if I change default to something else, it's not going to break. So the first thing we're going to do is deal with some logic of checking whether this default user actually exists. So how would we do that? We would do it just like this. We've got some async code following the same pattern as before. We call this .ref. Let's call this user ref, which is a much better name. And here's some async code, and all we're really doing is we're using that user ref, and we're calling a method called getDocument. And once we have the document, it has a property called exists, and we won't get an error here. We won't, like, the catch doesn't trigger if it doesn't exist. It will come in here, but it will say the document doesn't exist, and it will go to here. So we can do a quick test here. We can run this, and we should see it say document does not exist because there's no users collection and no document in it called default. And indeed, that's what we see it says here. So if we wanted to add a document, the process for doing that is really easy. When the document is not here, all we're going to do is call the setData method on it, give it a dictionary, and we're going to put one thing in there, the name and Michael. And again, this is not going to be doc, it's going to be user. Okay, so once that's done, we can run this. The first time it should take this code path, this code path, and it would add the document and say it does not exist, which we see. If I go have a look in the console and reload it, we should see a collection here called users. We see it has one document that has the ID default, and it has one property, which is the name Michael. Okay, so that looks good. If I run this again, it should take the other code path, and we see that we're just calling map, which does something for each property and data, and we're just asking it to be described as a string, and we see it prints this line. So it says that the default user has been found, and it's got one property called Michael. Okay, so that bit is all good in terms of adding the initial user document. What do we need to do now? The next thing we need to do is pretty much like we did in the other view controller, set up something that listens for this document. So what's slightly different about it is the snapshot lister used to be on a collection. Here we're doing it just on a user itself. Again, we have a closure that gets called every time that document changes and gets given document snapshots. From the document snapshot here, we can just get data because it's just one object that's changing. Then in here, if it changes in any way, we're going to clear our array of movies and we're going to reload the table view. Then we are going to check that we have a property called favorite movies, and if we do, we're going to cast it to document references and check that that can happen. Document reference here is the Firebase class used for document references. Then we say for each of these references in that array of document references, we're going to spawn a task asynchronously, and that task is going to use the reference to get the corresponding document. Once it has the document, it's going to save the ID of it, and it's going to check that it has some data, which is a title, a release date, and an overview. Assuming it does, it's going to create a movie object, and it's going to dispatch to the main thread and add that movie to our array of movies, and it's going to reload the table view. Alright, so we can run this now. It should work. But it should be empty. Okay, so here's where we need to make a change to be able to add a movie to this favorite movies property. So where could we do that? We can go into our select movie view controller, and we know we have our did select row at index path here, which is here. And previously what we were doing was we're calling this delegate method. But instead of calling the delegate method, we can just tell Firebase, we can get the movie. We need our default user ref. Okay, so that's good. Let's copy that, and we'll use it in here too. Not in here, in here. Oops. All right, so in here we can get our default user ref and we update the data. And all we're doing is we're updating this favorite movies thing. And like I explained in the workshop, this is a special syntax. This thing in here is just a document reference. It's a document with the ID matching the movie that was selected by the user inside the movies collection, and we need to specify an array of these things, in this case an array with one element, and it gets unioned with whatever is already part of favorite movies. This is a sort of exception where usually updating data would overwrite a property. In this case it unions it with what's already there. So we no longer need our delegation here, so we can get rid of that. I can just delete this protocol, and I'm going to go into my favorite movie thing and I'll delete this movie selection delegate, and somewhere here we have something called selected movie, and that was part of the delegation relationship, so that can go. Alright, so let's do a test now. We've made the change where oops, I've broken something. Alright, and now when we perform this segue, we no longer need to set up anything, so we can just simplify this code a little. Okay, so let's have a look. What I'd be expecting to happen now is that I could go into here, I could pick something like Restless, and it should appear here, which it does, so that's nice. And we can probably see when we load our view controller at the beginning that it says now my document data contains Michael, and it also contains an array called favorite movies that has a Firebase document reference as part of it. And we can have a quick look in the console here, and you can see this is the ID. So this is how you can reference something that has a unique ID in a collection. So it says favorite movies is an array of document references. This is element 0, it's movies collection, and this document. If I wanted to, I could find one of these movies. So this is Eternals, and I could copy, sorry, I can click here, I think I can double click. Somewhere there's a way, I've done this before in the past, if I can figure out how to do it. I just wanted to copy this oh, how can I do this? Just like that. Copy. Alright, so I'll copy this reference just by right clicking on it. I should be able to come into here, and in my favorite movies I should be able to say add a field. Not add a field, sorry. Add. Sorry, so I should be able to say movies and this one. And when I click add for Eternals, I should now have 2 movies in my favorite movies, and if I go back to my app, I now see Eternals in this list. So you can see how you can add a reference. So let's now do the work of, actually 2 things. We should probably add a title in here, which we haven't done. One way of doing this would be to, well, okay, let's write some code for this. So in my favorite movies, when I've loaded the document here, this is me getting the favorite movies, but I could also have some code here that said if let name equals data name, and data name would be a string, and if the name is set, then I'm going to say navigation item dot title equals name. And actually I'm going to say name favorites. So if the name is Michael, it's going to say Michael's favorites. Let's give that a try. Yep, you can fix that for me. And is this done in a task? No, it's not. Michael's favorites. Now the only thing we're not doing is allowing deletion here. I can click delete and nothing happens. So how would we do deletion? Well, the deletion would be pretty much the opposite of what we had with our addition of an element. So let's find that. That was in my did select row at index path. That's here. Basically just this code here. So let's grab this, and when we're committing our editing style, we get the movie at this index path, but instead of doing array union, we want to do array remove, and then remove this particular element. We can get rid of this code. So now let's give this a try. I can run this. I can delete restless, hopefully, and yep, it works. And then if I have a look at my Firebase, yeah, it's gone. And I can go back in here, pick another movie, and we see that gets added. So this is all working well. So this is version I'll put up on Moodle. I guess I'll just go in here and delete the remaining core data code just so it's a bit cleaner. Don't need that, don't need that. That all looks good. Pretty easy. And I'll check this one. Okay, so great, let's leave it there. Thanks for watching.